Do you know the one thing I'm really mad at Treason for? The fact that they didn't have a performance on the 5th of November. Come on! That's the date! Treason is a show that's had quite an interesting production history, starting off as an EP, getting an online concert during the pandemic, then having a stage concert at the Theatre Royal Drury Lane last year, and now getting a full run, a UK tour spanning from Edinburgh to London. This is a show that I didn't really love in the concert version. I kind of saw some key flaws in the material and laid out some things that they needed to work on. But a year and a bit later, the show has grown and rewritten itself, so I think it's time that we give Treason a second chance. Sadly, I still don't think it delivered. But why does Treason still not work for me? Let's find out. But if you haven't seen my face before, hi, I'm Ellie, I talk about theatre. I am the most chaotic theatre person on the internet. I do reviews, I do discussions, I do video essays, and if any of that sounds interesting to you, please consider hitting like and subscribe, it really helps me out have such a channel. But let's go commit some treason. Now before I start discussing this show, I do want to say just straight off, I do think that there is improvement from the previous production. This is a musical that I really, really want to enjoy, but I think its main problem is just it really lacks an identity. You can really tell that this show is trying to be British Hamilton. It's in their marketing. It's all about the place. But all of this stuff that it borrows from Hamilton doesn't work. Theatre has grown a lot since Hamilton. Even in the past couple of years, theatre trends have changed so much since Hamilton hit the scene. And because of that, it really feels like it's lagging behind. But let's start by discussing the story and the book. Now, I love a little bit of British history, because I took history at GCSE, and I actually really do enjoy history. So I'm going to enjoy taking you down memory lane of British history and why this event in history was important. So, this musical is based on the Gunpowder Plot. This was a moment in British history where a group of Catholics tried to blow up Parliament because of frustrations with the current king at the time, King James I. Back in Tudor England, after Henry VIII split off from the Catholic Church and formed his own religion, the Church of England, England kind of had two main groups of Christian religions that were kind of at each other's necks, the Catholics and the Protestants. And whoever was on top was based on the religion of the ruler of England at that time. So you started with Henry VIII. Obviously, as we mentioned, King Henry VIII, Protestant. His son, who ruled for a very short time, also Protestant. His daughter, Mary, actually changed over and was Catholic, and is often known in history as Bloody Mary because of all the Protestants she killed. Then, when Elizabeth took the throne, it switched back to Protestant, and suddenly the shoe was on the other foot. So, towards the end of Elizabeth's reign, the Catholics in England were really, really hoping for a break, basically. They were hoping that maybe there would be some chance that the next ruler would just allow them to live in peace. And they held out hope on King James I. Because of his mother, who was of a Catholic faith, despite himself being Protestant, they had a hope in their heart that King James I would actually be quite lenient towards them. And despite giving his word that he would be a ruler for all, quickly turned against them, leading to a group of Catholics getting very annoyed, angry, frustrated, and leading to the start of the Gunpowder Plot, where barrels of gunpowder were stashed underneath Parliament in order to blow it all to bits. This plot was eventually foiled. Now we remember the night of the 5th of November, where the Gunpowder Plot was failed, and we celebrate by blowing up fireworks and doing all of that jazz and all that jazz. Like most historical events, the meaning and the actual event have kind of separated themselves. It's more just a night to light pretty fireworks off, and if you're not lighting fireworks, be kind of annoyed that fireworks are going off outside your house. But Treason the Musical seeks to retell this story from the perspective that we're not used to seeing the story from. Because typically the story of the Gunpowder Plot is told from the perspective of the man who got caught, Guy Fawkes, who was in the room with all the barrels of gunpowder at the time, and the man who was burnt for the crime of treason. But Guy Fawkes wasn't really the main man in this plot. He wasn't the one who organised it, he wasn't the one who was driving it the most. This musical focuses on Thomas Percy and his wife, Martha Percy. And this is what I want to talk about first, because I think the focus of this musical is so strange. I think the basic concept is very interesting. I think the general idea is sound. But what the musical actually spends its time doing feels odd. It focuses on all of the least interesting things about this historical event. We spend a lot of time at the wedding of Thomas and Martha. We spend a lot of time on the letter and the promise from King James I. We spend a lot of time just waiting for things to actually happen. The entirety of Act 1 is essentially just the build-up to the plot starting, which I think is one of the show's biggest mistakes. Because we spend the whole time waiting in Act 1 for something actually interesting to happen. This is a similar problem to what I had in a concert. I don't think having the start of the plot at the end of Act 1 works. The most interesting parts of this story are the plot. We want to see the plot. We want to see the plot unfold. We want to know why they did it, why these men would go to this drastic measure. But instead, the musical spends so much time on these characters that you're not really engaging with. And then when we finally do get to the plot, it feels so rushed. It feels like this musical is focusing on all of the wrong areas of this story. And it doesn't do enough to really make us care about these characters to make it so that the change of focus actually works. And actually, it's the characters that I shouldn't be rooting for that I end up rooting for. Because the only characters with like really strong charisma and really defined characteristics in this show are the king and his aide. So because of that, I'm instantly more interested in their side of the story, which is clearly not what this musical is going for. Now, one very big change that they made from the concert at Drury Lane to now is who narrates the show. There is a lot of slam poetry baked into the show, which in the last version was delivered by a person learning about history. It was like a modern perspective on the whole event. However, they kept on dipping in and out of the show. They felt like such an odd presence, and it didn't really work. Instead, now, they finally have given this to the character of Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes finally has an actual presence in this show, and I think this was a great step. However, continuing the step metaphor, I feel like they took like 2 steps on a very tall staircase. Because how they've incorporated his inclusion is weird. It's kind of like he's counting down to the moment that he's caught. He feels like an ethereal presence. He's a bit ghostly. And because he's just kind of telling us a story and he's not really involved in it, like something, if we're going to use the Hamilton example, Aaron Burr is the narrator of Hamilton. He narrates a lot of it, but he's still involved in all of the action. Guy Fawkes isn't. So when eventually the show needs us to really want to root for Guy Fawkes, we can't. We don't know who he is. He's this ghostly, weird presence that's just kind of been talking at us. This is the right step. I think going with Guy Fawkes as a narrator is the right step, but he needs to actually be a presence within this story as well. And then we can talk a little bit about Thomas and Martha Percy. A lot of this musical is trying to pin a lot of the emotion on them. And there are tragic things about their story, but I don't really get them as characters. Thomas as a protagonist feels really weak. He has a very big leap to his stance at the start of Act 1 to his stance at the end of Act 1. And yet I don't see the jump enough. I don't see the twist, and I don't see why he would go to such a drastic measure. I feel like this could be very easily remedied with another song, something just to really hammer home the pain he feels at the end of Act 1 that would make him change his mind and change pretty much his entire worldview to join in with this plot, and to essentially betray his wife. Martha Percy does provide a nice emotional edge, but she kind of disappears a little bit. She disappears towards the end of Act 1 and doesn't appear again until the middle of Act 2. So there's not really much for me to anchor onto. I feel like focusing on a lot of the before the plot in this musical was the wrong decision. If you're going to tell the gunpowder plot, you should probably just tell the gunpowder plot. Because the way that this book is paced is so slow. It's such a drag to get you to the moments that you really feel like you're going to be engaged with. And then when you get there, it feels like it doesn't have any interest in covering it whatsoever. It is a real disappointment. And then we get to the ending. The twist in the concert version was that the wives were essentially the people who foiled the plot, which wasn't as empowering as I think they thought it was. Now, they have simplified this. They've cut the song where they basically say we're gonna kill our husbands. But this plot point still exists. Why? It feels like they really want that moment for the wives to actually take the story. Which again, just feels like they're kind of in the shadow of every single popular musical that's come out in the past couple of years, but it's kind of forgetting what made those work. It's the sixth twist. That's what they're going for. They're going for the sixth twist. But the reason the twist in 6 works is because we spend the entire musical with these girls kind of going at each other's throats. And the men aren't the focus. The men aren't really that present. You can't have that twist when the musical is barely focused on the women. And what's more, we have 2 women now. There are 2 female leads in this show. We have much fewer women. This ending just feels so underbaked. There's such a lack of impact on their deaths. It happens so quickly. And as an audience member, I don't really feel engaged with these characters enough to actually really get a strong response to their deaths. And the entire show ends with a massive speech from Guy Fawkes. It's a weird thing because I feel like all the pieces are there for something really engaging. The gunpowder plot could make a really good, gritty musical. It's there. It's all in that material. There is so much potential within this, but I feel like every decision is so strange. The focus it chooses to go for doesn't work. The pacing is so slow. I don't feel attached to any of these characters, and because of that, a lot of the twists that it tries to pull off just fall flat. It's such a shame, but I think the book is probably one of the weakest elements of this musical. There are clear steps to improvement, and you can tell that they have taken on board a lot of the feedback that they got from that concert. But still, I think there is a fundamental problem with the storyline that they've chosen to go with. Now, let's talk about some of the music of this show. It is a musical after all. Now, this show is no longer sung through, which I think is a great decision. It needed a book to go alongside it. It needed script. And a lot of these songs that have found their way still in the show have improved. One of the key ones I moaned about last time was the song Digging, which was mainly comprised of the word digging repeated over and over again. It's been changed and it works a lot better. But I think the songs that they've chosen and the songs that are in there are very samey. There's a lot of ballads, there's a lot of really slow songs, and in a show that's already quite slow moving, having very slow songs makes it drag a little bit more. I think there's 2 key songs that really do stand out to me that prove that there is something about this show that could work. Inevitable is a great song. It's performed amazingly by Nicole Raquel Dennis. It's this beautiful moment, this beautiful reflection from Martha Percy. And I really enjoy the Faith song that they have. The duet in 2 different locations from Thomas and Martha Percy, where they both kind of talk about their love for a certain person, because they're talking about different people. And it kind of contrasts Martha's faith in Thomas with Thomas's strong allegiance to Catesby and his plot, instead of having the faith in his wife that she has for him. It's a great way to frame these characters and how the tragedy that has befallen them has changed them. There's a nice villain song that Robert Cecil gets called, there's no song list in the programme, so I'm going to guess the song name. But I think it's called something like The Fly in the Ointment, which I don't think is a great song, but it's completely sold by Oscar Colomori, who hands it up, who is like the typical, it's Disney villain. It is camp to a T. And he's so engaging with it that it just works. There's a lot that doesn't work though. A lot of the songs feel like they go on for a little bit too long, and then a lot of them just kind of blend together a little bit. I feel like, and I'm talking about this here because I really want to join this with the show itself, the book and the music together. I feel like this show would work a lot better if it was one act, if it was 100 minutes through. I feel like there is such a pressure on the writers of this show to have the end of Act 1 moment be the start of the plot, which I don't think works, because you're waiting for so long to get to the part of the musical that everyone is waiting for. If it's one act through, you don't need to worry about that, and you can cut a lot of the fat of Act 1 and push it forward and give the actual plot a lot more time to breathe. We need more Guy Fawkes in there. We need more reason to actually be on side of the Catholics, because that's who the story is really trying to align us with. But because the King and the King's Aid are so charismatic and the actual lead characters aren't, we end up rooting for the monarchy. And trust me, I'm not a person who loves to root for the monarchy. The potential, which I saw in previous versions, is still there. It's just the focus that really made me struggle with it. Now, one element that I can talk about with this production that I couldn't really with the concert is staging. Because now we're in a fully staged production. This is a fully realised production. And the comparisons to Hamilton have never been more evident. Look, I'm going to say this very candidly. I don't want to see a British Hamilton. I want to see something new. Theatre has grown so much since Hamilton, and even shows that have been compared to Hamilton in the past, something like Six, bears no correlation to Hamilton. You can draw literal lines to the things that feels like they've just taken from Hamilton. You have the random chorus members standing around. You have the flying and the moving of the chairs and the tables and the flowiness of it. You have a lot of the choreography, which feels like that very modern style of dance and choreography, which even now, just 7-8 years gone from Hamilton, detached from Hamilton, has already kind of come and gone in musical theatre. It has all of these features that work in Hamilton, just kind of shoved into it. And because they've just been shoved into it, it doesn't match. It doesn't really connect. It feels like it's there because they want to be Hamilton, instead of it being there and it being done like this because it works for the story that they're trying to tell. I think one of the key examples of this is a lot of the scenes towards the start of Act 1, where we have a lot of the ensemble just kind of standing at the side, leaning on the walls. They're deeply lit, it's they're faded, but they're there. They have a presence. They're watching onto the scene. Why? Why are they there? These ensemble members don't really have much of a presence. They don't really join in to this scene much later. They join in with a dance in 5 minutes, but it's very interpretive and doesn't match the vibe of the scene. Why are they there? It feels purposeless. And what's more, these images on stage aren't striking at all. There's slight moments, there's a few moments in there where I feel like they strike a nice balance of this, having Guy Fawkes standing behind a lot of the plotters, and he's got his hat over his face a little bit, it's kind of covering his face, and he's standing there kind of silhouetted shadows, which kind of hints a bit more to his presence in this actual moment. That's a nice image. It looks striking. It looks nice. The ensemble members standing around in certain scenes, it's not needed. And I think that's the key problem with this direction. I don't know what this staging is trying to say for this musical. But I'll give praise where praise is due. The set looks nice. It's very reflective of the time period. I love the side bits that come out to kind of form the structure of a house. I like the bridge at the back. I think a lot of the set design really does work. It's striking. It brings you straight into the time period. I love the candles that align all the sets, bringing that like orange glow to a lot of it as well. It's just a shame that the direction and the actual staging of the show doesn't quite get to the levels that I enjoy this set for. Let's talk very briefly about some of the performances in the show. The strongest two performers in this show, mainly because they get the best material, are Joe McFadden as King James and Oscar Colin Murray as Cecil. Now, in the last version, the role of the king was very King George III. It was giving King George III through and through. It was camp as tits, he was chewing the scenery, he had flashy big numbers, and it worked for that. But again, it was another element of the show that was kind of bittersweet because you could tell how much it was just kind of taking stuff from Hamilton. I prefer what they do with King James here, and I think Joe McFadden does a really good job at portraying this. He's quite a naive ruler, he's quick to anger, he's very paranoid, and that is something that we actually know about King James, that he was very paranoid about people trying to take his life, and he was very paranoid about witchcraft, which they incorporate really well into his character in this version of the show. And as the puppet masker, Colin Murray is just fantastic. He is Disney villain. He is so charismatic as the king's aide that you are just immediately engaged with him. He gets like one scene in Act 1 and still he is the person who carries the most impact. The other cast members, I think, are let down by a lot of the script that they are given. Sam Faraday and Nicole Raquel Dennis are probably the key examples of this. I think both of them get nice moments in the show to really show themselves off and show off their vocals. Specifically, Nicole Raquel Dennis getting Inevitable, where they just sing that so well. And again, Faraday has some lovely vocal moments, but because of the focus of the show and because I don't really feel like the script is giving them enough chance to really dive into who these characters are, I feel like the performances do get a little bit lost. Gabriel Acamo plays Fawkes. As a narrator, I enjoy his presence. He is a strong performer. I think he carries a lot of the emotion. However, there is a key problem with a lot of the diction in the slam poetry that he performs. A lot of the poetry does get lost, and I did find myself really struggling to understand a lot of the actual finer details of the beautiful poetry that is encapsulated within the show. Treason is a new musical without an identity. Its strange focus and its weak plot are its biggest downfalls. There is a lot of potential within a musical with this concept, and despite some very clear efforts to improve on the show, unfortunately I still don't think Treason is a show to remember. But what do you think? Remember, theatre is what? Subjective. So if you love Treason, let me know. I really am glad that you enjoyed it. But whatever your opinions on Treason, please leave them in the comments down below. I love to engage with you and to have different discussions on theatre. If you did enjoy this video, please consider hitting like and subscribe. It really helps me, it helps out the channel. Here's some links to my other videos on screen right now and a link to my Instagram if you want to drop me a follow over there. But that's it for me today, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!